Okay. Hi, everyone. So this is a quick tutorial on how to change the pivot point of an object for exploded view. Now, before we begin, you may notice right off the bat that our model is not perfectly straight to the world space. So if you see here, this green line is a straight horizontal line, but you can see that our object is not completely straight or like oriented very straight. What we can do here very easily is select all the objects in the outliner and grabbing the rotation. So I'm going to press R, rotate this so it's somewhat a little bit more straight. Okay. And you want to make sure that you check all the other views. So I'm going to move to this view, see if that's straight, and that's looking good. Don't worry if the position is a little bit off center at the middle of the grid. The orientation is more important. Okay, so now that's done. You can see that because this had pre-existing animation because of an exploded view that was already there, and reoriented the default position, you will have to restart your animation. So I'm going to go ahead and select all these keys and have all my objects selected. I'm going to press X and delete the keyframes, and we will have to restart the exploded view. Okay. So for this tutorial purpose, I'm only going to focus on this object because the issue is I can rotate this along this line here. The orientation is a little bit off. See how it flips around like that. Okay, so you can see that the orientation is a little bit off, and we can easily fix that by changing the pivot point. So I'm going to hide these other components here. We're only going to focus on this. And we're going to notice that we have this floating red and white circle, and this is actually called the cursor. We can go to this tool on the side, select that, and anywhere we left click, it will move around. Now this will be our key on how to change the pivot point for our object, right? So the first thing to do is that we want to make sure that the orientation of this cursor, because if I just click there, you'll see the orientation is a little bit off. So we want to make sure that the orientation is nice and straight so it works very nicely. So usually, if this object has some kind of surface that's in the middle, we can actually snap it to the middle of the surface. However, for this component, since there's a giant hole, we're going to have to use a workaround. And an easy workaround is going up here to Object, and we're add Mesh and Cylinder. And Cylinder will work best for this type of object because it has one flat plane at the top that we can easily move around and place within here. So I'm going to move this into the inside of this model. So I'm going to press G. It's a free movement tool. And I know the orientation is straight by default, so I don't need to touch that. But basically, I want to make sure that the top plane, so this edge out here, is actually somewhat in the middle of this component. Okay. And you might have to adjust this a little bit later, but that's okay. So now that's done. I'm going to press Tab. And what that does, it brings me into component mode. And right now you have a bunch of these orange dots and they're all selected, highlighted in orange. And there's edge mode and there's face mode. Okay, select these here. So in face mode, what I want to do is I'm going to click outside the model first. So it deselects my faces, and I'm only going to select the top face. So only that is selected. Okay. And a neat little trick is that you can actually snap camera views to whichever angle. Okay, and this is going to be handy because we're going to reorient this 3D cursor. All right, so if I go back to this 3D cursor here, and while I'm rotating with middle mouse click, I'm going to hold Alt, and it's going to snap to one of the sides, which is great. In this case, I'm going to snap to the top view, like that, so I can get a perfect top view. And I'm just going to click on the face, and that's going to reorient it so it's nice and straight. So another thing we're going to do, because this face is selected, we're going to press Shift S, and it's going to bring up this menu, and we're going to hit cursor to selected. And what this will do is that we'll actually move our 3D cursor to the middle of that selection. Okay. And I'm going to hide this cylinder. And you may see that it may be a little bit off. That's totally fine, because while this is selected, we're going to slightly adjust this so it's more in the middle. Okay, and don't worry about going all over the place, because since we snapped our view to the top, it's not going to move around in the third dimension too much. Okay, so once that is done, I'm going to go outside of component mode by pressing Tab again. And I'm going to switch back to this tool, and I'm going to select my object, my component. Okay, now then we're going to go up to the object menu, and we're going to hit Set Origin, and we're going to click Origin to 3D Cursor. Okay, you can see that our orange dot moved to the middle of our 3D cursor, and that means that we changed the pivot. Okay, so now when I click on this object and I try to rotate it, it's a lot more straight. You can see that it does, along this axis, it does inflate a little bit. That is just because that this component isn't actually a perfect circle. It's sort of oval-like. But the orientation and the way that you can rotate it is now a lot nicer, that you can get it very close to what you want it to be. Yep, and that's about it. And you can do that with all the other objects, and you want to make sure that you go ahead and animate this.